Okay, everyone, we are getting started. My name is Josh from Speak Good Human, and we are doing a Mastering Intuitive Communication in the Flow workshop today, brought to you by Keri Davis. And this webinar is specifically designed to help animal communicators, empaths, healers, sensitives, all the people who are kind of related to our field. And it's to help us work kind of the flow of life and the energy, and to really work with it rather than against it. And I think, as Keri probably will be saying, we're all kind of struggling against it a lot of times. We may not realize it, but we are fighting the natural flow of life in many ways, and it hinders our ability to do things and makes it more difficult for us. And it could also create blocks and kind of hamper our ability to do animal communication. So I think that's what she's going to cover today, right, Keri?
Sounds good. Keep going. You
okay. Yeah, so I think she's going to help us identify how this flow works and how we can get into it and start working with it rather than against it. And a little more about Keri. Keri has been an awesome supporter of the site for several years now, and you can find many of her Dear Student letters and audio and attunements and instructions all over the site, including the quantum field section. And so you might want to check that out after. She's a certified interspecies life awareness coach, and she's been an animal communicator for more than 20 years, and she's an expert on quantum physics. She has a degree in holistic health sciences, and she's certified in rapid transformational therapy and has so much training in so many other areas, including a really cool program called Humans Understanding Nature and Animals. And she kind of brings all that expertise together to help us understand these really crazy concepts that we have a hard time grasping because they are kind of crazy and we have to get our minds around them. And Keri's here to translate that for us and bring it down to earth. And I'm going to put it over to Keri now.
Thank you, Josh. Sounds good. You should just keep going. You got it.
I don't know any more than I just said, so it's now up to you to fill in the gaps.
Oh, gosh, that's funny. Sorry if Oscar's talking. He's very vocal. He's my old guy with kidney disease that keeps hanging on. Amazing.
Oh, wow.
Can everybody hear me okay, Josh? Does it sound okay, the sound?
Yeah, it sounds fine to me.
Okay, well, let me know if it changes, because I have this little iPad because I've had computer issues, so it's kind of a bit awkward.
Okay.
Anyways, thank you, everybody, for taking the time today. And I wanted to just be very transparent. I just about canceled the class because I had lost my father last month, and I am dealing with a 92-year-old mother that's thousands of miles away, and there's been all kinds of complications and things. So my energy has been very much wrapped up in, of course, that. And when I thought about canceling, and I went, no, this is the perfect opportunity, with everyone's patience if I forget what I'm talking about or stumble around, is to really bring in exactly that. We have cycles and rhythms of life. And so many times we are going upstream, or we're so out of balance and we're not really quite understanding where the imbalance comes from. So before we dive into what I love is the 5 elements. And 5 elements is very old medicine, as most people know, and a lot of people that will listen to this call in the future probably are very well aware of Chinese medicine. My studies goes into Taoist medicine. It connects to everything. I Ching, it connects to homeopathics, it connects to hammer medicine. Like, it's endless how it interconnects with everything. And I do a lot of work with biofeedback, quantum biofeedback, and there's a really underlying theme of that as well in that feedback system. And understanding the terrain is huge. It's like the soil of us and of Earth. There's no escaping. We are all on planet Earth, and we were all here. No matter what we channel, what we bring in, we are still here in these suits. So anyways, before we get started though, I'm just going to invite everyone, and this is going to be a weird request, is to yawn. But when you yawn, just be aware of how you feel and just stretch and yawn. And when you're ready, do another one and really stretch. Feel into where you're at. How does that feel for you, Josh?
Well, I think it's because the actual act of yawning is so natural and on its own. You don't really say, now yawn. You just yawn because you're tired or whatever. And
well,
so,
that's what we are trained to think.
Right. Well,
but there is a reason for yawning when we bring consciousness to it.
Okay.
I'll share a little bit of the network theory that is sort of some of the newest in neuroscience, and I'm not going to delve too much. I'm going to try to streamline it. But network theory really applies for especially people like us that live in the imagination network quite a bit. And that includes fantasy, creativity. Too many hours spent in the center will lead to anxiety. It's got its purpose, but too much. So what happens is this network, you're pulling the past. You're still accessing your implicit memory system, so you're still pulling old information. So even if you get sparks of intuition, we fill it in with the old program when we hang out in the imagination center too long. So it's something to just be mindful of. And then when we get into what we call the focus network, and the focus network is that central executive function, and I've talked about it, and it's the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and it's within the frontal lobe. And where that is really helpful is in our planning and activities and focus. But the trick is, if you spend too much time trying to focus, you burn yourself out. So there is a balance between these networks, and that's what they call the salience network, and it's social awareness. It connects us all. It's intuition, it's empathy, it's compassion, it's forgiveness, and it puts emotional value on your experiences, which creates balance within all networks. So think about this system is like a juggling. So you're constantly juggling between focus, imagination center, and there's an overlap that happens, and we call it the salience network that we just spoke about. But yawning is an amazing tool to take you into that salience network immediately. Stretching, even touching your arm lightly or your face lightly, will change your focus. So if you're, say, sitting down to do an animal communication and you're so focused on, I got to do this, I got to figure this out, I got to come up with something, how do I, la, 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 what you're doing is you're burning out if you spend too much time there, whereas you're too much floating around in fantasy and creativity. It's great, it has its spot, but too much time will lead to a lot of anxiety and lack of focus. So does that make sense, Josh?
Yes.
So doing this for 8 weeks can establish 1,200 stress-reducing genes and turns on 1,000 immune-enhancing genes. So you look at a fetus around 16 weeks into the pregnancy, you will see that fetus yawning. And if they don't, they usually will have brain damage. So this is a huge regulating system. It's like your rad in your car. It cools the system. It allows blood flow again. So even just doing it every hour, if you're really focused on a project or you're, work at an office or you're doing your animal communication, it's just take that moment, stretch, yawn, and just bring awareness to that opening. Animals do this naturally all day long. They use it as their language. It's a calming signal. They just don't do it when they're tired, if you notice.
Yep.
So it's something that I really wanted to share with you because I said that I was going to add something into this talk that can help you assimilate information, intuition, a little bit on, what would you say, a little healthier by just this little awareness. So how's that sound?
That sounds great. I'm wondering how is it similar or not to, let's say, conscious breathing or some of those exercises that people say to do?
Well, see, what can happen sometimes is people can become too mindful, where they're overloading their system. So everything has a balance. So for example, if you were to go to the bank and you had to be at this meeting and you're running late, your main focus would be, okay, I got to get there. I got to remember to bring my checkbook and my bank card. And you're not going, oh, I have to feel my skin against my clothes and I've got to feel my feet on the pavement. There's too much sensory information coming in, correct?
Right.
So that's what happens a lot of times. We have too much sensory information, especially for people that are such empaths. And the truth of the matter is we as empaths cannot receive information unless we already have those circuits to feel it. So that's the thing that it's something that can happen a lot of times where we are just on overload. So having a focus, it's great having your mindful practice, and breathing is a big one for sure. There's no right or wrong with breathing, but this is just an added tool for people to bring in just a yawn throughout a day. It doesn't take more than a couple of seconds to do. So it's just another tool for your toolbox.
Okay.
Okay? Does that answer your question, Josh?
Yes.
So it's a juggling act. It's like we want to keep all these balls in the air, and we're not going to be, like we can't drive in fifth gear through town. So we're kind of moving in and out of gears. And that's sort of what we're bringing awareness to. Okay, I'm hanging out too much in my imagination, and I'm floating, and I'm getting lost. And now I want to bring focus. So intuition is sparks. It doesn't tell you the whole story right away. And we want to attach the old program to the spark. Does that make sense?
Yes. You're saying that in a negative way, though. That's what it's doing.
Well, it can be, because a lot of our conditioning and evolution is negatively biased because it was for survival. So we are, a lot of times, like, we are on the lookout what's not safe. What's the potential of danger? I mean, that's just our wiring when we are in that mammalian brain. But when we get into focus in that frontal lobe, we are now in that executive function. But spending too much time there, you can fry your circuits too. So it's a dance. That's all I wanted to bring awareness to.
Okay.
Okay? So let's dive in to the 5 elements and fall in love with nature's communication. And I don't know if everyone can see that little chart on the front screen here. I can see part of it. Can everybody see that?
I can see it, but I'm the one sharing it.
Okay, I just don't know if they can. I don't want to ramble on like they can see it.
Well, there's, yeah, I don't know. If there's an area, I don't know how everybody's connected, but if there's an area that you can look at any of the meeting resources, it should be there. There's 3 files, and we're looking at the first of them, the 5 elements and the shapes. And I'm screen sharing right now, so you should be able to see it on your screen if you're logged in through your computer or iPad.
Okay. Well, we'll just trust that they can see this here. So this is what I'm going to start with. First of all, this isn't what I'm sharing today is like a huge study. So I am sort of skimming through this. I'm also just wanting to say this isn't for diagnosing or any of the above. It's truly for more information for you, more tools for your toolbox, for you to have or maybe look at things a little different way. So when we talked about the focus, this might give you a little focus. When you listen to the person that comes to you, letting you know what's happening with Fifi, you might recognize, I notice some imbalances. And that's really what this gift is. So first of all, if you look at the very top, it's got fire. And before I actually dive into that, Josh, well, how do you define the difference between yin and yang?
How would I?
Yeah.
I don't know that I can describe that. It just feels like it's the opposite of each other. It just kind of both sides are needed to make a whole.
Okay. Is that your connection or is that mine that I'm hearing really static?
It's not ours. It's one of the callers, and I'm just muting everybody right now.
Okay.
Everyone, whoever's online right now, if you have questions during this webinar, feel free to use the chat, and we'll get to any of the questions that you have.
Okay. So yin and yang, yes, you're right. There's no separation. You can't have one without the other. You can't have night without day. So we know that there's always 2 sides to every coin. So if you look at yin, it's more of an interior of and has a tendency to be cold and heavy. And a lot of times it's the moisture and the coolness in our bodies. It's associated with water often, and it's very feminine and very creative in nature. And it's found at the deepest levels of our body. For example, the underside of a leaf. And then we get into yang, and that's the fire of of us, the circulatory system, the heating system. It heats and consumes yin when it's out of control. Yang directs the action and the movements. It's kind of like the horsepower of an engine, but remember, it takes yin parts to make the motor. So it's very much very useful in wakefulness and activity, and it really gets us moving in life. So if you look at the yin and yang, and we work at it like in this medicine, we look at earth. And earth is all of these elements. We can't have earth without these 4 other elements. So if you think of it this way, wood feeds fire, and fire creates the earth, which turns to ash, which then earth creates metal. Now when they say metal, we're really referring to minerals. The minerals we find underneath the ground, like zinc, magnesium, potassium, which then earth holds the water, and water feeds the wood. So does that make sense, Josh, to you, the circle of life and the elements?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that's sounding good to you. So we're going to start with the first element on the very top. And the reason why it sits at the top is because fire is upward moving. And in this kind of medicine, they even get into diet where there's upward motion and there's downward motion. But right now, if you just look at fire, it's up in the north because it moves up. And fire is considered a very yin. And it's also, whoops, sorry, my iPad's falling out of my hand here. Fire is such a powerhouse, if you want to call it. And if I don't think we have that chart up in front of us, do we? Which
one? It's
okay. You know what? I'm just going to skim through this first, and then we'll go into detail. I think that's probably easier with our chart situation.
Okay.
I think that might be best. So fire relates to summer season, so the heat of the season, and it relates to the heart and the small intestine. And I'm not even necessarily saying physical. We're talking all morphogenic fields. We're talking about the energetics. We're talking about meridians. So now we're going to go down to Earth. Now, Earth relates to late summer. It relates to the stomach and spleen, pancreas, meridian. Then we drop into metal, and metal is associated with fall. And fall relates to when, of course, the leaves start drying up, and it's time to release. So metal relates to lung and large intestine. Then we move to water. Water relates to winter, which then connects to the kidney and bladder. So really, when we get into the kidney bladder, we're looking at that downward motion. We talked fire moves up, the water moves down. And then we move over to wood, and wood is spring. And that connects to the liver and gallbladder meridians. So it makes sense, Josh?
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, before we get into the other chart, but you could put that other chart up if you wish.
Which one is that? The big one?
The one with the, like it's an actual chart.
Okay.
It's got all the elements and everything on it. But I will just continue here. So fire, if we look at an animal constitution, so just think of fire element as the happiest little dog that you've ever seen until their person is not around. Tends to be very anxious, hyperactive, barking hysterically. Their heart may be racing, tends to overheat easily, and not always the best in sun. Can be prone to some nervous peeing, not always, but it could be a sign, and so excited upon arrival of their person that they have complete overjoy. And in this medicine, that can be an imbalance as well, that you are so happy that you can't contain yourself. You're wired, you can't sleep. So there is an imbalance on that level too. And this whole system is related to the circulation and the digestive process. Heart is the prince of circulation. It supplies all the vessels in your body and bathes organs and blood. So it's a really huge piece for vitality. It is something to just take the overview of the energy that you felt from if you were to look at a fire animal constitution. Now I'm going to take you down to Earth. And Earth animal constitution tends to maybe be overweight, always willing to please, very obedient, extremely sensitive to their person's moods, can even poop out easily if they're low in stamina. Some days they prefer to be a couch potato. They can be worriers when stressed and often will vomit or have diarrhea or any sort of digestive issues, since earth is connected to the stomach. Then the one thing with earth, it's really interesting when they're out of balance. They might gain weight, but you might witness the animal wanting to eat paper products. Everyone relate to this, licking cement, and many unusual things. This can be sometimes linked to earth animal constitution that's out of balance. They may also experience poor teeth and gums, which can lead to heart valve issues, but I'm not stereotyping that this just happens in earth, because everything is always connected as well. Is this making sense so far, Josh? Am I reading too quickly?
No, you're fine. I think it's
okay. Good. So then we're moving down to metal constitution, and this is relating to animals. And metal is so interesting because that relates to our lung and large intestines. So this is a big place, and I know with my studies, with one of my degrees, is that this is, people would rather die than let go and forgive. So this is a really big piece for us humans to really understand the power behind true forgiveness, and then we can eliminate and let go. So this metal constitution, they may be prone to runny noses. They may have even developed an upper respiratory infection while young and having a hard time recovering, or they are prone to having bouts of issues. Breathing may never fully return to normal. Often you'll hear snuffles and congested sinuses, certain times a year more than others, or certain times a day. May increase, though, early hours of the morning around 4 a.m. They may also experience skin flakes, coat is very dry, tendency towards constipation, and they tend to hold on to grief. So you know the animals that really struggle after the loss of a mate. This could be an area that they may need support in. And of course, this is connected to the lung and large intestine. Then we're moving down to the water constitution. And this relates to our kidneys and our bladder. Now, this animal can be terrified of strangers, noises, moving objects. You know, even the animal that can't even handle a vacuum. And quite frankly, anything that moves can stress them out. They're often really thirsty and can grunt and groan or just slow moving when getting up. They like to drink from the toilet bowl or bathtub often and crave salty snacks. They may have a history of bladder infections or territorial stress. So kidney feeds and nourishes our bones, teeth, and skeletal system, and also connects to the ears. And we'll get more into these other connections, but I'm really highlighted that because kidneys really, as most people know, that's our life force. This is, like, we go through anything really traumatic, any heavy grief, we age the kidney chi very quickly. It's a very, very affected area often. So as we know, as we age, a lot of times we wind up with brittle bones. So this is a really great area to support. So that's, oh, I didn't do the wood, did I? No, I didn't do the wood. So wood element relates to the gallbladder and our liver. And this is really associated with the element of emotions, toxicity, and substances, especially for us people that have been exposed to a lot of toxicity. And I don't even just mean toxicity in our environment, but it's how we think and how we feel. Typically, what you will see in a wood constitution animal, they may be prone to bad temperament. They tend to leer, bark at the mailman, or lunge for other dogs. Anyone know about this? I work a lot with these at the shelter. Can get into fights and bully other dogs into submission. Bark can be loud, ferocious, and possibly moody and possessive over food, but can be the smallest little dogs ever, pound for pound. Though often very powerful, they are prone to ear infections and can a lot of times have an unpleasant odor. Their person may even go out of their way and feed them all this, special food, but they tend to just have those tendencies towards, allergies and other issues that we have seen many times. So does that sound clear, Josh, or have I confused everything?
It's clear, and my mind is saying I can't wait to hear how this is connected to us, and I know that you're getting there.
Yeah, so do we have that chart? Oh, yeah, you got it. Thank you. So I'm just going to I have a chart because there's just so much to this. So you see at the top, it's got, so we just talked about the elements. And I'm going to generalize, like we can apply this to animals or people. But we all know and would agree doing any of this work is that we're entangled. The people and the animals are entangled. So what's happening in imbalances in the household is happening within the dynamic with the animal typically. I'm not stereotyping saying because, the owner has a headache that the dog has a headache. All I'm doing is listening for the keys. And that's the key with this chart that you have nicely put here for us. Thank you. So if you look at the element on the left-hand side, I hope everyone has this in front of them. And beside there, it shows wood. So wood is what we talked about. That's the trees. And trees is what feeds fire. So if we look at wood, we know that the yin organ that it relates to is liver. Now remember we talked about yin and yang. So yang organs are the ones that do the emptying, where the yin is a lot of times a muscle. It holds, it contains, but the things that say like a bladder, it empties. So it's considered more yang. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Just stop me because I know there's a lot of talking in this. So if we look down, so we have yin is liver, yang, organ, gallbladder. We have the season of spring. So this is a time of new. It's green, it's growing, but a lot of times in spring, right, it's stressful for a being to deliver babies or to, it's not always a smooth process. Would you agree, Josh?
I've never had a baby, so
no. That's why I'm setting you up there. You can well imagine. You've had kids, But it can be also painful. It can be, it doesn't mean it's all glowy and ease. So spring has its advantages, and so think of it as the east. It sets, or it comes, it's the beginning of the day, the sun's coming up, there's new life, there's new buds. So we go into the senses. Now, the senses are connected to the eyes. So this would be like, say, somebody that says, you know, I've got a lot of floaters. I have weird night vision. It's not the best anymore. I'm seeing spots all the time. That gives you an example of, there's a clue. There's stuff going on with the eyes. And the tissue that is affected by imbalance with the wood element is sinews. So that's your ligaments. That's all your tendons, all of those good things that keep us going. So I have had a lot of those issues, but I've had a lot of imbalances in the liver meridian in my life. So it's really interesting to see when I've improved this that my tendons aren't tearing as easily like they used to. And then there's colors associated. So colors can be relating to food, or it can be relating to certain things. Like, say, green is a color that's wonderful. Like, for example, when you tie in taste and color, a Granny Smith apple, for example, can be really that sour in green that is really a really good food for the liver, gallbladder, just anything that's sour tasting. And the emotions that come from this meridian is anger and frustration. And the weather that is related to this is wind. So anyone that's really out of balance with this meridian can be really irritated by wind. It can be too much. So does that, going through it like this, is it helping?
I'm understanding you, and it's interesting, my mind is still trying to connect the dots between intuitive communication, going with the flow, and it.
Sorry, but you are trying to figure it all out.
Yes.
I said this is looking at nature, looking at the flow of nature. So just try to not figure it out.
Okay.
Just allow, because this is a lot of information. Like, these degrees are like years.
Mm-hmm.
So I am like giving, this may be even too much, but all I'm asking you right now is to go, okay, the difference between wood element to fire. What's the difference between wood and fire?
Well, there's lots of differences. One of them is solid, one of them is not, and one of them can burn the other one.
Exactly. So just that alone. So if you go back and listen to what I had mentioned about a wood dog versus a fire animal, there's certain characteristics, and these are giving you key points. So, for example, somebody comes in, like you're listening to someone saying, yeah, my dog is always like biting everybody, really acting very aggressive. And it's not even fear aggression, it's like full-on aggression. They tend to always be ripping their ligaments. They have a lot of soft tissue issue. They tend to really be affected, because I'm not getting into the circadian rhythm and the Chinese clock, but there's actually times of the year, times of the day that associate with weaker or stronger imbalances. But I'm not going there with this. So you could say, you know, that, okay, and also he's got gooey eyes all the time. He's got issues, is always going after his eyes. So you could just even by that go, interesting. Right there with what they just shared, you could go, there is definitely stuff happening in the wood element. You don't have to figure out what to do with it, just that that's information. And remember when I said at the beginning, if you spend too much time in that void of the imagination center, you get nothing.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to figure out the connection, which I know you're leading to, but I'm trying to think, okay, so if I look at all these elements and I identify what could be going on based on what's going on with me or my animal. Let's say that we use intuitive communication or animal communication as an example, since that's kind of what we're focused on, and we're not getting it. How would we use this chart?
This is a tool, Josh. It's a tool for your toolbox. So you may connect to Fifi and go, wow, I feel a lot of heat.
Oh, okay.
I feel a lot of coolness. Let me go through the chart.
Okay.
Because you don't expect yourself, like you're not going to use this and then go, okay, I'm an expert in this. This is where acupuncture comes in. You can do acupressure. You can do sound therapy. There's many different levels of how you can integrate balancing out systems.
Okay.
But it's really awareness.
Okay.
You don't change. See, you're trying to change nature. We are just trying to observe Mother Nature. It's information.
Okay.
It's a tool. Because animal communication is nothing but tools. And if you just go in sometimes, and this is what gets people into trouble, they're too much into this open imagination center, and they have absolutely zero focus. And they are inundated by too much information. So you could even have fun and go, okay, for fun, I'm going to just tune into Fifi and just get a sense of the cycle of life they're in. So, for example, if we're dealing with an older dog, well, what cycle of life are they in? They're not in the heat of the day, right?
Right. They would be, what would it be, water?
Yeah. So it's just looking, and every day we have these cycles. We have times where we're on fire, and there's times that we are in our water element. And it's just recognizing the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So I'm going to move on to fire.
Okay. I just want to let you know we have about 15 minutes left.
Okay, so I'm going to whip through this, and then I'm not going to be able to cover anything else. That'll be another class. But this is a lot anyhow. Like it's a lot of information. So, okay, so now we're going fire. So heart is yin, and the yang organ is the small intestine. And that is truly our manifesting spot. For people, this is truly our power of manifestation. This is a hot spot. Summer is the season, and here you'll see a picture of someone's tongue. So the sense that's connected with fire relates to the tone of voice. It relates to whether they have a weak voice or a loud voice, shows imbalances or not. It will be specific for speech and can even represent panic attacks, because when you're panicked, what do? So it's just a good image. The tissues that it relates to is blood vessels, our vessels. The color is red. So, for example, someone has a lot of heat, they're going to have a red face often. They're going to be flushed. Taste is very bitter. Emotions are joy. And you've got the full sun for weather. It's the heat of the day. It's a season of summer. Now we're moving to earth. Now, earth is what connects everything together. We can't have any of these without earth sustaining. So this is a really important one. And earth, the yin organ is spleen. The yang organ is stomach. Seasons, it's between seasons. So technically they say late summer, but it also can be used in some medicine as in between each cycle, like each element. So in other words, like every season, sometimes there's an overlap, and a lot of times the doctors will recommend just to really nurture your diet and support that transition. The sense is your mouth. Now, what the mouth represents is the start of our digestive system, and that is huge. If we do not have a healthy digestive system, it's kind of like the mother having a baby. She cannot produce a healthy baby, which is classified as the large intestine, without health and assimilation. So you'll notice maybe canker sores are an animal or a person might be prone to just really a lot of inflammation in their mouth, too much saliva, or not enough. Then it connects to the muscles. So a lot of times people will complain, or animals, about having sore muscles. They tend to be very sore, and they may not do a lot of activity. The color is yellow, and the taste is sweet, and they tend to be worriers and overthink. So who do you know like that? Do you know any animals like that, Josh?
I don't think I know. I don't think I've really connected with animals in this way before, where I've looked at all these elements.
Yeah, well now you're open to something new. The dampness that you see, the rain clouds, so for example, there can be a lot of out of balance because it's like our soil in a garden. We have too much rain and our system isn't doing its job. We end up flooding the ground, and a lot of times that can lead to a lot of mucus in stools, saggy stomach. They can be prone to lumps and lymphomas, which I know a lot of animals do wind up with. So that's a really big piece there. Metal, let's move up to metal. Good old lung is the yin organ, and the yang is the large intestine. We go into the season of fall. The sense is our nose. So you will notice a lot of times, like I said in the animal overview, runny noses, sinus problems, postnasal drip, and a lot of times you might notice it in the fall. Not always, but you may notice there might be a tendency of that happening. Then you know you're kind of more into that real metal type of sinus issue. It relates to the skin. So a lot of animals, people will be very prone to a lot of dry, flaky problems. Yes.
Keri, you're fading out.
Can you not hear me?
Oh, now I can.
Okay. Did you hear what I just said about skin?
I heard it, but it was getting to be very distant. But
Okay.
I hear
Well,
it.
just in a nutshell, skin very dry, can have problems, maybe some allergy issues showing up, spots on the skin. You heard that.
Yes.
Okay, and then pungent. So that would be for taste, very like a lot of spice, a lot of the typical pungent Middle Eastern type spices. And sadness. Sadness is a really big emotion here, a lot of grief. And then we've got the little deserty cactuses at the bottom representing dryness. So if we tend to have an imbalance, we might have too much dryness. So that moisture that feeds the garden is drying up, and there could be too much fire. But I'm not going into how they, that's a whole other, that's like diagnosing. Then we move over to water. Water is the end of the cycles. It's relating to the kidney, which is yin, the bladder, which is yang. Now, a lot of animals will have issues here when they don't feel safe with boundaries. So you know how animals mark territory? Well, this is a really big piece of boundaries. And they will mark it, and if they have any insecurities here, they can show up with different bladder issues, kidney issues here, especially bladder, even when they get inflammation, or even crystals for that matter. Season is winter, so it's the fall, or it's the winter of life. It's pulling in. And sense is hearing. So what happens when we get older? I can't hear you. So ears are a big factor in the aging system, especially when it relates to the kidneys. Also, like I said earlier, shock can be a huge, huge issue for people and really declining their chi with their kidney and life force. Tissues it relates to. It feeds the bones. So the blood feeds the bones. The kidneys help clean the blood. So we're looking at bones as a really big piece. So you've got an animal that comes and they're really, really brittle. They're breaking bones. A lot of times you're looking at kidney, or they start really hunching up, disintegrating. Color black. So this might look like, say, somebody that you notice, like a person that has really dark circles around their eyes. They're retaining water. They're retaining a lot of fluid. Salty. The taste is salt. Love the salt. So you may notice seaweed for people is a really big one here. Anything that has the iodine in it. And we have shock and fear, which goes with, of course, this area. And the season is winter, cold. So how does that sit with you, Josh? Just that overview right now.
Yeah, it's interesting how it all relates.
Yeah, so in other words, when you take this, it's not like I'm asking you, oh, you're going to start, next consultation, you're going to receive all this in your communication. You may just go in and just go, you know what, I'm just going to play in this. I'm going to set my focus. So you're going to that frontal lobe that we talked about for focus, and you're going to go, okay, and you're juggling those cycles, so you're also accessing the salience, which is where your intuition is. And you could just say, okay, so what I do know from the person is that they're saying that their animal tends to have a lot of really dry, flaky skin, and they're always itching, they're always snuffly. They tend to have sometimes digestive issues, and they seem really sad and depressed. Where would you say that sits?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on. Oh, probably the metal.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So someone also said, like I described, the fire animal. They're so high-strung and so excited, like they're just overjoyed, or they may be devastated as soon as their person's gone. Mm-hmm. And they may have just that tendency to be so overheated even in the full sun. Where does that fall?
That would be fire then, right?
Yeah, yeah. And someone comes to you and they say, you know what, Fifi tends to have a lot of issues with her stomach. She's throwing up, or just something's not right there. She tends to have just like a funny bark. Sometimes, there's this different tone. And her muscles tend to get really just tight, or she's just, her muscles just, like even a person, their muscles just don't respond like they used to. And they tend to worry a lot, or they just don't seem happy.
That would be Earth.
Yeah.
We have a few minutes left, Keri. Do you have any wrap-ups on this? Next steps? What we can?
It's just quit trying to make it something and just be with it. Just look at, we don't change Mother Nature. We've learned that. We don't control the sun. We don't control the moon. So it's like, just notice, okay, I just notice that there's certain characteristics that I'm feeling. And you may even just I would have liked to have had time to do a little meditation, but we won't today. We've covered a lot anyhow. But just sit, close your eyes, tune in, and just spend some time just taking wood and envisioning, where does wood sit for you in you? Where does it sit? What do you see? What is your experience? What does wood represent to you? And then go through it. Go through fire. What does fire feel like? Feel the difference between, okay, I just was in wood, now I'm transitioning to fire. And then you go through the list. Earth, metal, water. There's only 5 elements. And the trick is, it's the transition between the 2 is where the information is. Because there's space to receive something other than your head projecting in to how to figure it out. So it's that wood, just feel, Josh, close your eyes, and just envision wood. And move to fire. What was the difference you felt between wood and fire?
Movement for me. Wood was just sort of there, solid, and fire was alive, full of, movement.
Okay, and now go into fire and go to earth.
Yeah, and that went from movement to more of a groundedness.
Okay, and now we're going to move. We're going to just ask questions. I wonder what metal would feel like compared to earth. So we've got earth, questioning metal.
Yeah, and to me, metal is colder and it's a little more immovable. It's more solid than earth would be.
Okay, and then metal to water.
And that, again, water just, for me, is about movement, flow.
And what I liked, like even in metal, you said colder. Well, you're moving into fall. You're moving into that season. Right? Like it all aligns, and it's like, so just take your piece with how you connect to it. Don't try to connect to how, say, someone else would. So just play with, okay, so just, in your meditation is like, okay, I'm curious where I sit right now with the 5 elements. What's prominent in my life right now? And just allow what needs to come through. And remember, intuition is a spark. It's not a whole story. The whole story is we've just downloaded all our old programs. That's the thing people really need to get.
Okay.
Okay.
So would you say that this would be a good thing? It sounds like we would always be kind of shifting and changing, and so checking in with ourselves relating to these elements would be a good thing if we do that. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly, because we're always changing like nature. We're connected. We are here on Earth. And remember, the Earth is the center of all. It's in between each element. And it's really, really important to get that it's like, how are we, because this relates to the 5 pillars, which is really about is how do we assimilate life? How do we eliminate? There's many levels of the cycles, and we need to have all of these in harmony to create health, but we never are in full harmony. That's unrealistic. So it's us just to go, okay, I'm tuning into Fifi. I'm just going to have fun. I got a few little tools from my box. And I'm just going to see if I get any feeling. Like, do I feel like this dog's on fire? Like, is there a lot of passion? Or is there just a lot of sleepiness? Is this animal in, a transition? And I think the biggest thing that I've made mistakes with, trying to keep animals alive when it's their time to transition. And we do that. Instead of showing up where they're at and supporting them there, we try to build a fire again. And they aren't equipped to build a fire. They're not 20, like, as people. We're not 20 years old again. So there's like a progression as well. But remember, Josh, every day you are in the fire of your day. You're in the wood of your day, spring. You're in the earth, and you're also in the metal and the water. They're all happening. So understand that, okay, I'm better at doing my animal communication in the day. Like, say, it might be better for you in the mornings than at night.
Yeah,
So it's learning cycles, rhythms, and even craniosacral. It's a rhythm. You're reading the cranial, the nerves, the spinal fluid. You're reading that. It's subtle energy, but that's the meat. It's the pulse of who we are. And we're so busy caught up in all those systems and protocol, and just listen to the rhythm. We all have a rhythm.
Okay. We're just about done here, everyone. If anyone has a pressing question that we can maybe answer quickly, feel free to type it into the chat. And otherwise, we will wrap things up, and this recording will be available at some point. I'm not sure if it sticks on this page or not, but we'll make it available. And you can reach Keri at sacredkinship.com. That's her website, and you can find out more about what she does, because she certainly does a lot of different modalities and ties everything together for us. So it's pretty cool to see how it all works. Any questions from anyone out there? Keri, did we lose you?
No, I'm here. I'm just listening.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Well, I just, as always, I just really appreciate people showing up and taking an interest in opening themselves to new possibilities, because that's what the quantum field is.
Yeah.
The trick is we can't be attached. It's step out of the box, look at the old box and go, yeah, but I'm going to this box, but I don't know what's in it. All I know is it's a sense of relief, because I am an infinite being with infinite possibilities. And that's really, there's nothing more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good thing to remember, because we get too closed into rules and guides and other people's opinions, and this just frees us to do what we need to do when we feel like it.
Yeah, it's such a gift, and I was really hoping, but it wasn't realistic on my behalf, is to do some sound therapy too, because you can really tie in all of this too. But that will be another time. It's too much. As you can see, it's a lot of talking in this type of model.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you said, another time we'll see how everyone thinks, and what they want to get another one out there, then we will definitely schedule it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us, Keri. This was so interesting.
You are more than welcome. Enjoy, and don't make too much of it.
Okay.
Don't over-process.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good day.